if you get a rating. Money will hit your bank before you get the letter. Most important message that I want everybody out there to get: the date you start collecting is the date you file. So every day you wait to file is a day you are not collecting. It may take them 9 months to adjudicate, but you're going to get back pay for 9 months. My wife came to me and said, hey, there's a whole bunch of money in the bank and I have no idea where it came from. Well, that's a good problem to have. For some people, the money is important. That could be a game changer in your life, especially if you're not able to get a job. It's a pretty serious job. It's pretty good money to help you pay bills and help you survive.
Welcome everybody once again to Retire.Army, where we talk about all things retirement and transition in the military and analyze the transition journeys of service members across all branches of the service: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, doesn't matter. Today I have with me a very special friend, very special guest, Kevin Heimlicke. We've known each other for quite some time. He's been a sort of a mentor of mine and been my rock over the years. So I'm glad to have him on the show. It's a very interesting conversation we're going to have because he has actually 2 retirements under his belt, one from active duty military and one from the military, from the reserves, and then one from the DA civilian side of the house. So with all that, welcome to the show, Kevin.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm glad to have you on. It's good. It's always good to talk to you. I get a lot out of our talks and I really, really enjoy spending time, and I like to catch up. As you know, like when we met in DC and hung out, and it's always really, really good to catch up with you. So let me jump into the weird question that I ask at the beginning, which is the morning routine. And I know that we've talked about 2 retirements. Let's actually compare and contrast what it was in the military, your morning routine, versus what it was when you switched over to DA civilian full time. And then once you've hit both of those retirements and you've moved on to a new book in your life, what does that morning routine look like today?
My morning routine when I was in the military was always up, dark 30, getting ready to do physical fitness, do PT with the unit, right? It always started off in shorts and a t-shirt just about most days. Obviously, there were certain days where we didn't do training, right? So it was always physical fitness, eat, shower, eat, go to work type uh, program. And then when I went into to civil service, right, it changed dramatically. I was still getting up early, but I was getting up early, having breakfast, getting dressed, shirt and tie, right, the focus, and right into work. No time for physical fitness. And as you can probably imagine, when physical fitness is not a priority, if you don't make it a priority, your body lets you know that it's not a priority anymore. So it changed dramatically, and it's kind of funny. Since I retired, I mean, I've gone through ups and downs as far as going through and working out. Right, I get on the workout bandwagon, and then of course, as you go through life gets busy, and you make excuses why you can't do it. Right, there's always something more important than physical fitness. And I'll tell you, at my age, and I'm not, you probably interviewed a lot older people than me. I'm 57. I pay the piper for not working out every single day. So my message to people is don't let your workout suffer, right? Because you'll pay dearly for it in the end. Now that I'm working private industry, I think the only thing that's really changed is that I go into work a little bit later, right? I get into work at 8, where I used to get in at 6:30, 7 o'clock, even as a DA civilian. But that's the only thing that's really changed in my routine. I think the other thing that's changed is as a contractor. Now that I'm a contractor, the level of responsibility has gone down quite a bit, and with that, the stress level has gone down tremendously. And I think that's super important, right? Because when you're in a position of leadership and responsibility, everybody's looking for you for the answers, right? And when when things go wrong, right, you're always planning for plan B, plan C, plan D. And I've been in private industry now since October of last year. And I can tell you that it has taken the weight of the world off of my back. And I really enjoy going into work every day, right? It doesn't feel like a chore anymore for several reasons. Number one, the responsibility. Number two, knowing that I don't have to do it, right? I think that makes a big difference. Do I still provide value to the organization? Absolutely, but in a different role. Somebody else is, answering to leadership at the government, right? Not me. I'm providing the details behind the scenes, and I think that makes a really big difference in the perspective. There's a lot of people that come out of the government, John, that can't let go of the fact of being in charge, right? And they go into private industry or they go into contracting and they're used to being the person to go to, right? And having the authoritative answer. And, I'm okay not being in charge. There's a lot of people that are not okay with that. I'm okay not being in charge. I think it's pretty awesome that I can still deliver the solutions and ideas and develop them for somebody else to give.
Do you feel like that comes from, I know you mentioned responsibility, but do you feel like that stress and that burden kind of comes from that, stems from that, or is it just the virtue of the job itself? Because I noticed when I switched over from enlisted to warrant officer, I had that same kind of epiphany where it was like, oh, I can go to work in uniform and have fun. Oh, I can enjoy it more. There was a lot less stress in the job itself because I kind of picked and chose what I wanted to do. And it was a more proactive thing rather than saying, being told like, oh, you have to go do this and we have to knock this out and we have to take care of that. Of course, there's some of that going on, but even at the W-2, W-3, if I would have stayed to W-4, W-5, like I'm not really sure that the responsibility would have taken over and made it more burdensome for me. But do you think it's because of the virtue of like, say, a GS 13 or 14 position or a sergeant major or a first sergeant position? Do you think it's because of the virtue of that responsibility that makes it that much more difficult and that much more burdensome to actually go to work every day? And
I think it's a couple things. First of all, as a warrant officer, right, they put all the stress on you when you go through the warrant course, right? So they teach you to be resilient to the stress, right? Because if you can't be resilient, you don't make it through the course. Even though I haven't been through the course, I have lots of friends like you, several friends who've gone through the warrant officer course, and they put you through a lot of stress to teach you to be resilient. And they should probably do that in a lot of other jobs, right, to make you resilient to the stress. So I think it's personality driven, first of all, the kind of person you are and how you deal with stress and external problems. I think it has to do with the responsibilities in the job that you're in as well. Depending on the job I had as a government civilian for 10 years is I was responsible for the network defenses at the Pentagon, right? I got to be right 100% of the time. The enemy's only got to be right once, right? That's a heavy burden to carry, especially when everything's going fine, and then all of a sudden, right, something doesn't go well, right? Because so we're not right 100% of the time, and things happen. And of course, now you're on the defense explaining why, right? It's all of a sudden it's your fault. What did you fail to do? And then, after 30 days of, 7 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day, you find out that it's some application that somebody failed to update or somebody abused their credential privileges or something like that. And it's really not you, right? So once you go through that a few times, you're always on edge. When's the next one coming? When's that going to happen? So I think that's part of it, right? I think the position and the responsibility you have is tremendous. And some people are okay, right? They're resilient to that. I'm the kind of person that takes it personally when the bad guy gets lucky, and I consider it very personal because it's right. It's like being at war in the cyberspace, and you got defeated. Now you have to take that terrain back from the enemy, right? They got into your terrain space, and now you're going back to take it back. And so I don't want to say it's pride, but I think it's professionalism in the job you do.
Yeah, it's a really good insight. I like that a lot. I always think about it and go back and forth about it because I know there's certain jobs that I've had where it just felt effortless, and there's certain jobs that I've had where it was not effortless at all, and always trying to figure out that dichotomy. And as you said, resilience. I'm glad you brought that up because it's really, I think, in the last handful of years, maybe 10 years or so, or 15, or however long it's been in play since we started the resiliency training, despite the backlash from most soldiers and civilians that it's, a waste of time and it's nonsense and it's touchy feely. Like once you start to, if you just let it happen and you start to internalize some of that wisdom and that knowledge about resilience, then you can kind of unlock those key core characteristics that you need to be able to fight through things like that and to let things go a little bit easier as well too. I mean, you still have your pride in the job, but you have a more calm demeanor when it comes to understanding, reacting, interacting with people and things of that nature. So yeah, I like that. I like that answer a lot. Let me switch gears and let's go back to when young Kevin Heimvicki came into the military. Can you put us in a place and time where you were, maybe your mindset at the time of what the trigger was for you to then join the military?
Yeah, back in 1986, I was dating a young lady, and it was pretty serious. And at the time, right, I didn't have a great career path. Right, it was I was working at a pizza delivery place as an assistant manager, and that definitely wasn't going to pay the bills for a future. And she saw that, so she says, you want to get serious, what are you going to do? And I happened to be rooming with a guy named Ed Chauvin, and Ed had been down there talking to the recruiter, and he'd come to me every day and talk to me about, all the great things that the Army does and why he's thinking about joining the Army. And I didn't even want to join the Army, John. The initial reason I went to go talk to the recruiter was to shut up Ed, right? Because I didn't want to hear about the Army recruiter anymore. So I did go down there. I did talk to them, but believe it or not, it put a seed in my mind, right? The great thing is, right here I am. I'm in this serious relationship with this young lady. She's looking at the future. What does a pizza delivery manager have for me, right? Which is not much. And then, I go down and talk to the recruiter, and he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to fly, helicopters, right? Oh, are you a high school graduate? No, I'm a dropout, right?" And but it put a great bug in my head, and then so I ended up looking at the Air Force. And this is a great story. Ironically, I was going to join the Air Force, and the recruiter was supposed to pick me up to take me to the ASVAB test, and he happened to have me picking me up right across the street from the Army recruiter's office. Well, nonetheless, the Air Force recruiter never showed up. So I run across the street. Of course, we don't know that these guys are in competition. Right? You don't know that when you're civilian. And I said, "Hey, the Air Force recruiter didn't show up. Can you guys get me down to take the ASVAB?" And they're like, right, of course, their spidey senses are like, "Wait, we got somebody. This is easy. We just got to take him down to get the test. We got him in." And they said to me, they said, "Well, we can take you down. Are you interested in listening to what we have to offer?" And basically, I told me, I've talked to you guys, and I've heard what you guys have to offer, and you guys are full of doo doo, right? And so they said, "Well, listen, come back. We'll have you talk to the station commander, and I'm sure we can work so out." So, long story short, I took the ASVAB, come back, and talking to the station commander at that time. The word station commander, right, sounds pretty impressive, but working for the recruiting command now, I know that just a staff sergeant or sergeant first class, right? But you think, you're talking to this big guy, right? But anyhow, he goes, "What's important to you?" I said, "Going to college." I'm a dropout. I got a GED, but that wasn't my path. That's not the path I wanted. I want to have a degree. I want to have a real career. So he showed me, you can go anywhere and take college courses. And so, boom, there I am joining the Army. So that's how I ended up in the Army. That's unbelievable that, somebody that I was friends with annoyed me enough to go down and talk to them for the wrong reasons, but planted that seed, right? And created a career for me that if that never happened, I don't think I would have the great experiences that I've had along my all my career and all the people I've come across. I think uh, life would have been much different.
Yeah, it's those little serendipitous moments that catch you by surprise, and you can't really, I mean, you do see them in the moment, but you really appreciate them like in hindsight whenever you get down the road and you're like, hmm, that one little happenstance thing that just occurred and it brought me here. So that's an interesting story, and bad on the Air Force recruiter. He lost out on his quota for that month.
Yeah, he did.
Let me let me move on a little bit to your transitioning out of the military, like coming completely out of the military, and then actually switching over to full time GS employee. Like, what did that transition like? Were there any? I don't know if there wasn't SFL TAP when you did it, was there?
There wasn't. It didn't exist, right? So my situation's a little bit unique in that when I left the army, uh, active duty. I didn't immediately become a sole servant. I went into private industry. Ironically, we're talking about recruiting. I worked at the 6th Recruiting Brigade in San Francisco. My last active duty assignment. They were moving down to Las Vegas. I decided I wasn't going with them. I was going to get out of the army. That's when the dot coms were kicking off. 99, 2000. Life was good in the dot com world in San Francisco, and everybody was offering jobs. But I will tell you that even though the job market was really good, John, I had a wife, I had one kid on the way, and I had to really think about strategically planning. I just couldn't walk out, right? And I think a lot of soldiers do that, right? They make a decision that the army is not for them, or maybe full time's not for them, and they decide to get out. And they do that when their reenlistment window opens up, right? They really hadn't put a lot of thought behind it. I started planning my transition out of the military 24 months in advance. What are the things I need to do? What does success look like at the end if I'm going to transition out of the military? Number one, I didn't even want to go in the reserves. I had no intention of going in the Army Reserves. But again, it's amazing the things that are put in your way, right? I'm married to a lovely lady from Germany, and the one thing that she absolutely wanted was access to the commissary to get access to those German products. Even though they're not many, it's still a little bit of home, right? And serves me well because I get good home cooked German meals. But so I wasn't even planning to join the reserves, just planning to get out, right? Do my own thing. Didn't know what that looked like, had no clue, and started planning, right? What is the real cost, right, of living on your own, right? What does it really cost when the Army pays a lot of those things for you? What does insurance cost, right? Because people don't realize they got to pay for medical benefits. There's all these benefits we get in the military that we don't account for that have a cost in the private world. And so I had to plan all that out, and I did. And I was very fortunate. I got out. I did join the Army Reserves because happy wife, happy life, and I learned that at a very young age in my career. And so I joined the reserves, and that was great. But getting out was a sharp transition for me, especially being a non-commissioned officer, right? Because when I got out, I was a sergeant E5, and yeah, E5, E6, E6. I was staff sergeant, and we were. I kind of told it like it was, right? Very direct in my approach. Well, I'm living in San Francisco, and nothing wrong with San Francisco. It's just a different style, right? When there's a problem, you can't say it's a problem directly. You have to kind of coach the words. And where I knew I was in trouble, John, is when my boss told me that from now on, before I sent any emails, I had to send him to him for review before I hit send. So, I actually worked private industry for almost, yeah, it was 2 years, 2 years, yeah, 2.5 years before I became a civil servant. But I learned a lot in that time, right? Number one thing about working private industry, uh, I was very fortunate at the time I was in there because they were desperate for people with IT skills. So I kind of got away with a little bit more than I would in normal private industry. But, most states are at will. Basically, at will means I don't like that white shirt you're wearing, Kevin. So guess what? Today we're going to let you go. And there's really nothing, long as it's not EEO based, there's really not nothing you can do about that. And that's important for people that are transitioning to understand, right? There's no guarantee that you're going to be working tomorrow for that company. And oh, by the way, there's no guarantee when that company lets you go that there's going to be a pension package, right, to transition you to get your new job, or that another job's going to materialize. And just to piggyback on that, when I came into civil service, another godsend, talking about retired Lieutenant Colonel Larry Warren, right? Bringing me into civil service at a perfect time. And that was a time where the dot coms were really the venture capital money was drying up, right? And a lot of people were getting laid off. Let me tell you, it was really, really ugly. And the problem is everybody was making this great money. Well, when the market dries up, guess what happens to salaries? They get a lot smaller. And the problem is a lot of people were spending way above their means. And now they had to take a 30 to 40% pay cut just to have a job. And there was several people, John, that weren't willing to do that. And I'll be honest with you, when I went from private industry to civil service, I took roughly a 50% pay cut. But I did it for you got to have the bigger picture. Again, you always got to be planning for what's coming at you, right? So my advice to anybody who's thinking about getting out of the military, don't wait till the last minute to make that decision, especially if you got wife or kids. And you got to have a plan. You just can't hope that it'll happen. Even in my time now, and I think it's important to bring it up now, John, in my time in civil service, I've even seen a lot of lieutenant colonels, full bird colonels, sergeants major, master sergeants getting off, and they just think that they're going to walk into a job, but they really don't have a plan. So it's not just the enlisted. I've seen it on the officer side. They got to have a plan, right? You have to have a plan. And if you don't have a plan, if you're not floating your resume 2 years in advance just to learn how to improve your resume and how to do interviews, right? Nobody says you have to take the job, but these are skills. These are important skills that you just don't gain overnight, right? You learn from mistakes and get feedback. So that's probably one of the biggest things that I would say to anybody transitioning to think about is planning, right? Mentoring, and I'm sure we're going to talk about mentoring, right? And learning what to do so that when you do get out, you can be successful.
Yeah, and even if you are putting your resume out there 2 years in advance, like I'm living proof. I've been putting my resume out for almost 3 years in advance to all kinds of companies, GS positions everywhere, and still to this day have not hit one yet. And I've interviewed for multiple positions. So, and part of it is my specificity about wanting to move out of the country, and they kind of like shake a fist at that a little bit. But I actually wanted to ask and dive down like a little tangent. The You were in San Francisco during the dot-com bubble. I assume you were there when the bubble burst. How does that compare? Because you speak about it as far as like the jobs going away, the venture capital money going away, and we're kind of seeing that same kind of thing going on now. There's a kind of a dot-com bubble, and it's more like a Web3 AI bubble, really. Plus the economy in the United States right now and in the world is a little bit crazy. And we've actually already passed the bubble phase, because usually it's about 10 to 12 years somewhere in there, whether it's the housing market or the interest rates or whatever. We're really sitting in that period where the bubble is like at capacity, and it's just a matter of time before it potentially bursts. How do you compare that back then, the dot com, the 99, 2000 dot-com bubble to what's going on in the job market today and what's going on in the tech industry? Because there's a lot of people that are getting into tech, even people who aren't technical. That it's been commoditized to the point where you can build applications and you can build SaaS products and things like that with no code tools very quickly and spin things up and spin companies up very, very quickly. So how do you look at that when it comes to today's era of the tech industry and what you see comparatively to the dot-com bubble of 2000?
So I think what's going on now, John, is very similar to what happened. You know, really, it was 2002 when it really bust. So about 20 years, 21 years, right? Very similar parallels. And that if you're in private industry, right, or people are promising you something today, it might not be there tomorrow, right? It really might not be there tomorrow because the world that we're in. I mean, there's a lot of people getting laid off today. If you look at all the big tech sector jobs, Amazon, Microsoft, Oracle, you name it, they're all laying people off, right? It's cost cutting and it's just the way it works. So I see it very similar. Uh, what you're talking about AI, really, we're talking low code, no code, artificial intelligence taking over a lot of the job markets. If you do the reading out there 5 years from now, there's a lot of jobs that are going to be obsolete. So I would tell anybody, it's a young kid who's thinking about going off to college, a young NCO thinking about transitioning out to the military, look at what you want to do and how that fits in the landscape today, right? For the kind of work you want to do. You need to choose smartly. I'll be honest with you, while AI will enhance and probably make it better, the area that I see is going to be resilient to this for 20 plus years is going to be the cyber world, right? Because at the end of the day, cyber can do the low level stuff for you. And I'm sure, John, it's going to progress over time and get smarter and be able to do more and more. But at the end of the day, when you make decisions to do stuff, it's got to be a human body looking to make sure this is what we want to do, especially when it impacts operations, when it impacts, making sure that you got it right, that it really is an adversary trying to get into the network and, not a script kiddie, right? Because the retaliatory actions could be very different, right? So I think cyber is a great place to be in this resilient market. Another great place to be is the airline industry. I got news for you. I mean, you look at the pilot shortage. We think I'm willing to bet you this summer, because people are flying like it's nobody's business. I think we're really out of the pandemic. And, they extended, mandatory retirement from age 60 to 65 for pilots. Well, guess what? A lot of those guys are hitting 65 now. And so another great area, right? Another great area is data science, data analytics, right? I don't think we're in the information age anymore. I think we're in the information overload age, right? There's so much information available today, and I don't think we know how to properly harness the information we have. So it's a smart place to be. Yeah, we can apply artificial intelligence, machine learning to that data, right? But in order to apply it to there and get out real good information, right? What do you need? You need somebody to help define those parameters, right? So these are some areas that I think are important. Another area, that I think is important, it's the last one I'll bring up, John, is law enforcement, right? I don't care if it's at the city level all the way to the federal level, right? It's a very unpopular profession today, and rightfully so. But I think there's a lot of young people out there that understand why it's an unpopular thing. And I think we're at the cusp of changing, right? If we were to recruit the right people into law enforcement at all levels, could have a huge impact in the way law enforcement moves forward in the future. So those are just some areas that I think in this type of market where if you're a soldier getting out of the military, right, or you're trying to think about where should I be focusing my efforts, that's where I would look.
Along those same lines, what do you think about, and I don't know if you've ever taken something like this. don't think you have, but and I do want to move into your civilian transition over to the private sector, finishing a career in civilian sector. But before I get there, I want to ask what your thoughts are on, say, a gap year. So, like, if you go to college sometimes, or between high school and college, a lot of times you can take a gap year, or between, your associates and your bachelor's, you can take a gap year, travel the world, go backpack through Europe. And I know the demographic is, older, 40s and 50s, and that's not generally the ideal situation. But then again, when I look at the way the world is moving, the way technology is moving, the way AI is augmenting a lot of things, the way a lot of these jobs are getting taken away because the big tech industries are trying to cut the fat on their business model, and then couple that with the 2 years of the pandemic, where the initial jolt was, oh wow, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs because we just can't keep these businesses open because of the pandemic, to a few months later, or maybe a year later, where people start to realize, like, wow, I can actually stay home with my family and spend quality time with my family and do my job. And in a lot of cases, I can do it better because I'm in a more conducive environment to get things done and be more productive and make more quality outputs. Do you ever think about that, or have the thoughts about that, or even with your children, like the possibility of taking a year off and just getting your mind together and understanding the landscape before jumping back into it?
It's a big question. It's okay. That's why I enjoy talking with you. I just want to let you know, like, I learn a lot from you talking to you as well. So, it's a two-way street. So first thing is, the decisions. I'm probably a tough dad. I'm a tough dad, but I'm a fair dad with my kids. My kids are now all grown up. When I say grown up, I mean my youngest just turned 18, just graduated from high school, on his way to college. But in my house, college is a business decision. It's not a touchy feely thing, right? I tell my kids, you got three choices when you graduate, right? You choose. Three choices are: go to college full time. And even if you want to go to a community college, you're welcome to stay home, right? Stay home for free, right? No pressure as long as you're going to college. Even if you want to take classes online, whatever, you're welcome to do that. If college is not for you, which is not for everybody, I'm kind of fortunate. All three of my kids, my two oldest are graduates, of a 4-year degree, and my youngest is going to do the same. But if it's not for everybody, and I understand that. So, my option number two is do like you and I did, John. Raise your right hand and swear to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. Join the military, right? That's a great option for somebody who doesn't know what you want to do. And, option number three is rent starts at $500 a month. Mom doesn't do the clothes, right? She doesn't wash the clothes. And it's not to be a jerk. It's just, that gap year you were talking about is about what can you afford to do, right? Right. And if you're paying for it on your own, in other words, you raise the money to do the gap year on your own, like you were going to school and you were earning money on the side to be able to afford that, then I'm good with that. I don't think mom and dad should pay for it because you're not learning any value, right? I think the value of mom and dad paying for that versus you paying for that and taking that year off and traveling the world for a year, I think you would appreciate it a lot more if you had to pay for it on your own, right? Versus mom and dad paying for it. Likewise, in the workforce, right? I've always said it's easier to get a job when you got a job. So if you take that gap year off, especially in how things are dynamically changing, um, you may be putting yourself behind the power curve, just depending on the work you want to go into. Depends. I mean, if you're actively studying, going to seminars and that year off and professionally developing, that could be a good thing. Could be a good thing. And right, if that gap year is used productively to improve your skills, I think it's a great idea. But again, it's a business decision. Can you afford to do it? Right? Do you have kids to feed, a wife and kids to feed? Right? I don't know. So everything's about a business decision, right? And the one thing I would say that I think is most important about this, and as a closing thought, is whatever you decide, don't ever regret it. Do it and commit to it. And guess what? Let's say you decide I'm going to do this gap year and it's not working out, you can't afford to do it. Okay, but at least you tried. Don't be mad that you did it and that you couldn't afford to do the whole year. Be thankful for the time you had and nug on, right? Get down to it. Do what you need to do to correct it, right? So everything's a learning lesson. So I always look at the negatives as learning lessons just as much as I do as the positives. So I think that's what's important.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on the cutting them off and taking the tether off, because with that money that comes from mom and dad comes also the kind of underlying, not necessarily spoken about elephant in the room of like, well, you're still living on my dime, right? So there's still some kind of like push and pull and tug, and they want to do their own thing, and they're still taking money from you, but then they want to be independent. So yeah, I 100% agree with that, that the sooner you can cut them off from the money. And again, it's not about being mean or being cruel. It's about forcing them to make a decision, and forcing them to make a decision and stick with that decision, right? You take away the safety nets. There's a good book called Burning the Boats. It just came out this year. Incredible book. And it talks about that time honored tradition of battle, where you go into battle and the general or the commander who's in charge of the regiment or the squad or the team or the company cuts off the supply lines, which then forces you to make a decision. And that decision is either you fight and you win, or you don't fight and you die, right? So it's a very tactical uh, choice to do that, to cut them off from the money, and to teach them that they, if they, if you want to do things and you're in your 20s or 30s or whatever. And same for people transitioning out of the military. If you want to do it, like, commit to it 100% and try to actively make the best use of that time while you have it, because you may never get that opportunity again, and it's a great opportunity if you get it. So it's kind of what I've been doing. And it feels strange on some days, and I have kind of this tug of war back and forth. But you're right. If you go into it with some kind of regret, you're gonna regret it more that you didn't take it and put 100% into it than you will if you did take it and didn't put 100% into it on your deathbed at the end of the day. So
It's very true. And just another thing, even though I'm tough on my kids, one thing my kids always know is I'm there to help them, right? I'm severing that tether for one reason, because the world is cruel and doesn't give you a break. And all I'm trying to do is get my kids to be able to realize how ugly life can be at times. And I'm not going to be around forever. So I want my kids to be able to stand on their own 2 feet, right? And survive in this crazy world, right, that we live in. I mean, that's the important is it's nice to always have a lifeline, right? It's good to cut the tether and let them experience it. Let them make mistakes, let them fail. But at the end of the day, they always know they got a place to live if they need it. They always know if they need a cash infusion for something, they come up short, that you're there to help, right? That is the difference in the dynamics, right? Of doing everything for your kid, and then when you disappear, they don't know how to do it on their own. Vice teaching them and be a tether, be that lifeline to them. That's so important.
let's transition, no pun intended, into retiring from a career in the civilian world. What did that look like? Because I don't think a lot of the audience, and me personally, I don't know what that looks like, but I think for some, it's a natural progression where they go straight from the military straight into the GS system and then do another 20 or 30 years and then retire again. So maybe as an anticipatory thing for them, what does that transition from civilian career look like?
That's a great question, and very similar in many ways to exiting the military. In many ways, and I'll tell you why. First of all, retiring from the GS system has many benefits. Even today, right? People think, oh, it's not worth it today. There are many benefits to doing that. Even if you didn't serve in the military, if you're in the GS system, right, there are so many benefits. But I'll tell you one of them that's not there. While there is a retirement check, it is not this big pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that people think it is, right? It's really not. I mean, it's nice to have, don't get me wrong, but it's a simple math equation. It's your high three, the average of your high three, times the number of years you serve times 1% annually, right? I retired as a 15. You would think of retiring as a 15, making what I was making, that there would be this big check. And the reality is it's nothing, uh, it's something, right? It's nothing to shake a leg at, right? Or ignore. It's a significant amount of money. But if you think you're just going to live on that, especially if you're living in the DC area or any big urban area, you're not going to be able to live on that, John. That's just the reality. Here's the power, though. The power is in the benefits. So usually when you retire from a job, you get into the retiree pool for insurance and for medical and for dental, and you're older, it costs more, and it can be very cost prohibitive. The great thing is I'm in the same medical, dental, and everything with everybody else that's in federal service right now. So my costs are much lower for those things. So there's a give and take, right? Remember I talked about the realized value of benefits. But I will tell you that I started planning my transition from civil service about 2 years in advance. I was pretty sure I was going to retire. It's kind of on the fence. Um, but a guy by the name of Ed Shin started mentoring me. And a little bit about Ed. Ed was one of the founders of a company called Fed Data, which is a large IT contract and services firm. And, he left and he's building his own company today. That happens to be the company I'm working for. But I will tell you what he made me realize is that if I wanted to do the things that I really wanted to do, staying in civil service was not going to get me where I wanted to be. And so, I thought I was going to stay in civil service till 62, 65, like a lot of people do. And I'm not knocking the people that do that. God bless them for their loyal service and the extended years that they give to the government, right? Because it's a loyalty thing, right? I mean, they're really being loyal to this country, and God bless them. It's not that I'm any less loyal, just um, I've given my whole life to the government since I was 20 years old. And now it's time to enjoy what I wanted to do. So making that transition is also not easy because most of the jobs out there are not management jobs. Most of them are techie jobs. And if you've been working in the government for 20 years, what are you doing? You're doing mostly management work, right? You've been out of the techie world for quite some time, and now you're trying to get out there and work. So what are your options? Sales, program management. So you got to really think about those decisions when you decide to get out. When I first got out, I started working for a small company doing business development, which is sales, right? Really business development sales. And I'll tell you, I did it for 6 months, John, and I was really excited when I got started. I was motivated, I was hungry, and I was doing all the things. But I will tell you, it wasn't easy. And it didn't take me but about 4 or 5 months to realize that while I was doing okay doing it, it wasn't what I wanted to do. And then this opportunity where I'm currently working opened up, and I'm doing program management. Like I said, management jobs are few and far in between compared to the techie jobs out there. And I'm really enjoying what I'm doing, right? Because I've been able to take all the experiences of the military and the civilian world leadership, and I'm able to apply them to managing a program for the government, right? Where I'm a contract lead, managing program, supporting the government, providing them what they need. And what's great is remember I talked about at will, all that stuff, right? I got a great team of folks. I'm really fortunate. I've had to let a few people go, not because I want to just let people go. Just you got to play nicely in the sandbox, and if you can't, well, I'm sure we can find you something else somewhere. I'm sure you can find something out there that you can do probably better. And but so a lot of the leadership challenges I had in the military, a lot of the leadership challenges I had in the civilian world. They still exist in the private world. The difference is how much effort it takes, right? Because first, what you always want to do is you want to reform. You want to correct the behavior. You want to correct whatever. It doesn't matter what your background is. But if somebody's just resistant to that in the military and in the government, it's tough, right, to get rid of them. In the private industry, it's actually very easy, right? Not that you want to get rid of anybody. Let's be honest, that's never the goal in mind. But um, you don't have to tolerate as much as far as going through hoops and hurdles to get people off, out of the program or out of the organization. So it makes a big difference. But it's a different mindset too. I can't, like we talked about earlier, I can't be that same guy. I can't bark. I'm, you know, I'm very when I say submissive, I'm very respectful of the government. I understand my role. We talked about that earlier. No, understanding your role. You have no more authority. You make recommendations. The government can take them or they can not take them. So, yet if you can get in that mindset, right, after the military or civil service, there's a great world out there for you.
Can I ask you if you could possibly name off like a handful of things, one or two or three things that you mentioned you carried with you from all of that time in the military and all that time in civil service, like maybe one or two things that stick out in your mind that you use continually now in your private sector job that you've carried over from all that time in service?
Absolutely. I give you two things. First of all, whenever I encounter a problem with somebody that works for me, first question I ask myself is, what am I doing wrong? That's huge. It's easy to point the finger at what somebody else is doing wrong, but what you need to do is look at yourself, right? Why is that person doing what they're doing? What am I failing to do that's causing whatever that is? Could be, it doesn't have to be behavioral, it could be performance. I didn't give clear directions on the task I wanted done. That's why I didn't get done. That's one of them, right? I didn't get that overnight. That came over years of experience, right? But that's super important, right? And the other thing is making sure that you are open to suggestions and ideas. It's one thing to say it. It is another thing to where people in your body language and the things you say feel comfortable coming to tell you things that might be uncomfortable for you to hear. It's important that people can come talk to you. And I've always told people, I said, I want you to disagree with me. Disagreements are healthy. Healthy disagreements are healthy to solving problems. And all I said is, please just don't come tell me this is broke. Tell me what you're going to do. What are your recommendations to fix it? And the people that do, I'm telling you, I learned more from people uh, by being open and receptive to ideas that were against the way I wanted to do stuff. And I think if those are the two things I think that have helped me and I've carried through my whole career.
Let's shift gears once again and let me dive into the VA benefits because that's a huge topic. There's stuff out there. I feel like VA benefits and navigating the GS system and getting into the system are like two of the biggest black boxes in the government. Maybe there's more, but those are the two ones that stick out in my mind. Can we talk about, I guess, your definition of the VA and how that works? And then maybe as a B, what are some important things to understand prior to getting out, post getting out of the military?
Before I get into that, let's talk about the history with me, right? I think that's super important for anybody who's really listening to this. Super important. And here's why. I was the biggest naysayer on the VA. I didn't, first of all, I didn't believe anything was wrong with me when I get out, right? That's a typical perspective that a lot of people take. right? Well, I got out in 2007. It's now 15 years later. And guess what? There's a lot of things today, 15 years later, John, that are not okay with me. It's just taking time to show up, right? Number one. Number two, I didn't think there was any benefit, right? What real benefit? Everybody talks about money or job preference, right? But you don't really see that as a benefit. And there are so many other benefits. Um, and number three, I had lost my medical records. I was an idiot. I didn't make a copy of my medical records, so I thought there was nothing I could do. And here's the deal. You're talking to a guy that is now 100% permanent and total IVA disability, right? I was probably one of the harshest critics, and now I'm one of the biggest proponents out there. Everybody I talk to, including you, John, it's a conversation I have with everybody. And so here's the thing that I would say to anybody who's like me, or even to any degree like me, that's important. Number one, you serve this country. And it doesn't matter how you feel today, it's about how you potentially will feel tomorrow. So do the filing. Today it's easy. Everything's online today. It is so easy to do. You create an account, you go in there, and I know you look at it, you say, well, I only went to sick call for this. I only went to sick call for this. Okay, file. What's the worst that they can tell you? Sorry, this doesn't qualify, or this is not service connected. Right? Do the filing. It's not really that much effort to do the initial filing. And I will tell you, we probably talk about this whole topic, John, for hours, but I'll just tell people that when you get your answer back, the answer is not the final answer, right? There are appeals processes within the VA. There are all kinds of external organizations that will help you once you filed to either get you a rating, increase your rating. So there's so many opportunities, and it's not only about the finances, it's about the medical care. Today, the VA has great medical care. So if you're not going to get, if the money's not important to you, what ought to be important to you is the medical care that the VA can provide you, right? And then it's the benefits that your dependents get, right? We talked earlier. I have three boys. Two of them are out of college. Well, you know what? My youngest is going to go to school tuition free. He's going to get a federal stipend from the government. Now, John, let me ask you a question. Do you think that my older kids are a little bit jealous because I sat on my butt and I did nothing about it for so long? Right? But at least somebody's getting a benefit. It's not only benefiting me, it's benefiting my family. You know that my middle one, he's in the state of Virginia. He's eligible till age 29. Both my kids. The state benefit goes all the way to age 29 for training, for vocational training, for college. I mean, there's so many things. If you read the benefits, everybody thinks it's only about federal benefits. Whatever state you live in, there are state benefits that exist as well. So there's a lot of people talking negatively about the VA. I think the VA has come a long way since 2009. Is there room to improve? Absolutely. But you know what? They're working to get better. And if for those that don't know, right, the medical records from the military and the medical records from the VA are completely separate. The DoD today is building a single source database to keep all the medical records so that when you do, right, you won't have to go find medical records. They'll already be there for the VA to evaluate. Now, last thing on this, for those of you getting out, go get the evaluation before you get out. Don't wait. Do it when you transition. Be rated when you get out of the military. That is so important. So important. Because if I would have done that when I was getting out, when I had that big brain that said, oh, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm fine, I would have lost my medical records. I wouldn't have had the issues, the uphill battle that I had. So I can't express how important that is and how much the VA is really there to help the veterans.
Yeah, and so I just want to pick out two things. The P&T, if you could explain that for people who don't know what that is.
Absolutely. So P&T, permanent and total, when you get a 100% disability rating, if it's not permanent and total, it means that the VA thinks that you could potentially improve, which means they may reevaluate you every 2 years. When you are permanent and total, it means they are never going to come back and look at your health, right? They believe that your health will never, the things that you have filed for, and everybody's different. Everybody's got different issues out there. Um, that they believe it's not going to get better. So you'll never have to go back through the evaluation process.
And that's also the thing that unlocks the, say, the lifetime up till 29 years old for your kids' schooling. Are there any other kind of things that go along with that that you can think of off the top of your head, at like the federal level?
No, that's great. At the state level, every state's different. They have their own rules, but they're fairly common. I live in the state of Virginia, so the state of Virginia, you don't have to be permanent total. 90% or more disability rating and all those educational benefits I talked about, the dependents are available, right? At the federal level, it's 100%, right? So to unlock that federal entitlement, it's 100%. It doesn't have to be P&T, right? The only thing P&T changes is whether you have to be reevaluated or not.
When you're referring to get your evaluation done, and that's actually with a VA hospital evaluation, not just a military hospital evaluation. So the distinction is very, very, excuse me, the distinction is very, very clear. Um, the benefits delivery, discharge, doing all the paperwork, putting in your medical records, getting all that stuff together with an advocate on, usually on the base, if you're on a base, or you can reach out. They're all over the country. Um, and getting that done prior to separating from the military then allows you to get your rating. I believe it's within 30 days after you exit from the military. So that locks in your kind of your VA rating. Now, again, is it going to be 100%? Is it going to be 30%? You don't know. You'll find out sooner than you will if you put it in after the fact, which is what I'm dealing with now. So let's talk about the folks who are dealing with it or doing it a year or two or five after they get out. Maybe they're in the same kind of mindset that you or I or anybody else would have, where, I'm not broken, I'm fine, and my back's okay, and I can deal with the pain. Let's talk about those folks and what kind of path that looks like, because it's the path that you went down. Can we dive into that a little bit?
Sure. Um, so I went onto the VA's website. It's very easy to get on there, how to file a claim. You got to create an account. If you don't have an account, you have to be verified. There's several options, whether it's ID me or login.gov, right? There's several. But you choose what works for you. But once you get in there, walking through the process, I mean, it literally takes you through the whole process online, right? And here's the great thing. Today, you don't even have to provide medical records. You can request the VA to go get those medical records on your behalf. Obviously, the easier you make it on the VA, the quicker, right, they get to adjudicate. But when I did my filing, there were certain things, certain records that while I was serving in the military, there are follow-on medical records from private practitioners that I saw, right, that I could request online. I give the practitioner's name and the VA would go get those medical records. So they make it really easy for you to do. So you file and then you wait and you wait and you wait. So be patient, right? You have to be patient. Don't think that they forgot about you. They didn't. When you file, you can check on that claim. It took me, I think, I want to say 9 months to get my first adjudication. 9 months. Uh, I didn't hear anything for about 5 or 6 months. And then I had a medical company call me. So the VA contracts third party with medical companies that do your evaluations. So you'll go see a private doctor that's contracted with the VA. And when you go to see them, right, here's the thing, and this is not gaming the system. This is making sure you understand, right, the things that you need prepared. Let's say it's your knees. I'm just going to use knees for an example, right? And you've had lots of problems with your knees. You jumped out of airplanes, you ruck march, God knows how many miles, and now your knees, right, they're not that great. Well, the day you go to see the medical doctor, your knees may be okay. You may not be in pain, right? But you can't go the day you go to see the doctor, you have to put yourself in the mindset of what your worst day is like. That's not gaming the system. Maybe it is the worst day when you show up to the doctor, but the doctor is only going to write up what they see. And please let me be very clear. I'm not asking anybody to lie or fib. That's not what I'm saying is. You know you. You know what your worst day looks like. And that's your opportunity to go to the doctor and communicate that, right? What your worst day looks like. Now, I will tell you, the first time I filed, I was kind of shy. Again, here's my opportunity, and I missed the mark, right? And I'll tell you that you're not doing yourself any favors, right? You got to be honest with yourself and accept the fact that your worst day is your worst day, and the doctor's only going to write up what you tell them. They're going to examine you, but they can't get inside your head. They don't know what your pain is. So it's so important to communicate that message. The other thing that's super important in the filing, and I can't stress this enough, is your statement or your spouse's or siblings or dependents, your children's statements. They're powerful. What I need everybody to understand is an evaluator for every single claim you file. Let's say you have 10 things you're filing for. On each one, the evaluator has about 10 minutes to make a decision. Sounds like a lot of time. They're looking at the medical records. They're looking at, right, what the doctor evaluation said. What the doctor needs to know is, how does it impact your life? They already know that you have problems with your knees. They already know you have limited range of motion. How does it impact your life? And I'll give an example. When I went back for my reevaluation, I have a lot of problems with my ankles and my back, right? I explained to the VA in a letter, and I wrote a separate letter for every single thing I filed for. I ended up selling the home I lived in. This is a true story, because in Virginia, most of the houses, the bedrooms are up to the second floor. To find a house with a bedroom on the main living floor in Virginia is very hard, but I found one. It has created a quality of life for me, but I have a problem going up and down stairs, especially on a bad day. That's how it impacted my life. I had to sell my home and move. That's impact. That's a message to the evaluator. Remember, the evaluator works for the government. Their job is to protect the government's interests. Your job is to communicate your message to the evaluator of how your life is impacted. So if you don't do that, if you have a spouse, your spouse writing is super powerful to the evaluator, right? So, and if you don't have a spouse, it's okay. If you have children, or you have, people well that can write a lay statement, then please do it. And one last thing on this is, you may have something, and I'm not going to get into those, it's, John, another discussion, right, about the details, but you may have something that the VA may cover, and I'll give you a prime example. Sleep apnea might be tied to high blood pressure. So you might have to go to your doctor and say, hey, I'm on high blood pressure medicine. Would you be willing to write me a nexus statement saying that you believe that my sleep apnea is tied to the fact that I'm on blood pressure medicine? Don't be afraid to ask your doctor. What's the worst your doctor can say? No, I don't feel comfortable. But your primary care physician is probably the best one to determine whether there is a correlation. And if they are, and they're willing to write a letter, that's also powerful to your packet. So I think those are the things, John, to go through, and just be patient. And what you're going to see is money will hit your bank, right? If you get a rating, money will hit your bank before you get the letter. My wife came to me and said, hey, there's a whole bunch of money in the bank and I have no idea where it came from. Well, that's a good problem to have, right? Because don't forget, most important message that I want everybody out there to get: the date you start collecting is the date you file. So every day you wait to file, right, is a day you are not collecting. It may take them 9 months to adjudicate, but you're going to get back pay for 9 months. Think about that. For some people, the money is important. That could be a game changer in your life, right? Especially if you're not able to get a job, right? The money is not insignificant. It's pretty serious, John. It's pretty good money to uh, help you pay bills and help you survive.
Yeah, that's probably one thing that I did not consider is the back pay and just the process itself. And again, I've been sitting on the fence with it because I've been going back and forth with an advocacy group who's not necessarily set up like a regular advocacy group, and the conversations that I had with them, and it's just this weird kind of tug inside that just goes back and forth with the VA process for me. But yeah, I'm definitely in the process of filing it. And I guess on that note, once I get my rating back, let's say it's 30% or 50%, once I get that rating back, what would I do if I felt like it needed to be higher, or if I felt like maybe they missed something in the process and I want to go back and reevaluate it? What are some options for me?
Great question. First thing I would do is when you get back your evaluation, you'll see it online, John, and you can appeal to a higher level authority. And that'll take some time for them to contact you because I did that uh, through my process. And when the higher level authority calls you, you got to be prepared to explain to them what your rating is, why you think it should be higher, what is the evidence behind that you think they missed, right? You have to be able to lay it out. They're not going to make a decision there. They're just going to listen to you. It's a recorded conversation. They record it to make sure that they don't miss anything, right? So be prepared to be recorded. Again, they're just doing it to make sure that they have all the facts to make a good adjudication. Let's say for me that was favorable, but it wasn't as favorable as it could have been. Okay, but they made an adjustment. Let's say they don't make an adjustment. There's another appeals process you can go through with the VA. I haven't done that, and I can't speak to whether, you know, how that works. But what I can tell you is when I got back my initial rating at 60%, John, I was so excited because I never thought I would get 60% on my first go around, right? I told my wife I'll be lucky to get 30%. And I didn't even know what that meant when I said that. I didn't know what that equated to in money or benefits. I had no clue. When it came back 60%, I, John, I was over the moon. And what did all my friends tell me? Kevin, you're not going to just sit on 60%. You're going to keep on going, right? Well, I'm hard headed, just like I was hard headed about filing in the beginning. I'm like, no, I'm good. And then my friends kept on pecking away. My wife kept on pecking away. And I'm not going to mention any advocacy groups because there's different groups out there that do different things. There's different approaches to it you can do. Some of them cost no money. Some of them cost money up front. Some of them cost money in the back end. Some of them take a percentage of your pay. So just know that there's a lot of them. There's money involved, right? You need to vet the ones you're going to use. So I did. I went with a company that helped me, and I am a very rare case where I got to 100% permanent and total my second time around. It's like unheard of, right? To get it first or second time around is very rare, but I did. Um, Again, I don't equate that to the company. I mean, the company helped me, right? But you got to still help yourself. You still got to do the things, right? And I learned from my mistakes about my what I told the doctor when I went to go see the doctor. I learned my lesson about how it impacted my life. I learned the second time around. I listened to people. So I think those are important factors in how I got to 100% P&T the second time around.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to take in, and I know it's on a lot of service members' minds, whether they're sitting on the fence about it or they just don't want to apply for VA benefits because of the fact that they feel fine, or they go in and they cheat the system and lie. You know, there's many different points along the spectrum where people lie, but it's definitely something That's really important, especially when it comes to the time of transition. Even if you're not retiring, right? Even if you're just getting out after 6 years, it's equally important at 6 years, right? If you spent 6 years as an 11 Bravo and you deployed 4 times in those 6 years, it's equally important. So, yeah, I appreciate you expanding on all of that. That's very, very insightful stuff. I want to kind of I see like this reoccurring theme of when you were getting in, when you did your VA benefits, you had a multitude or a few people putting the bug in your ear until you finally went and said, you know what, okay, fine, I just want to shut them up. um, along that along that sentiment, I wanted to see if we could go back, and this is completely hypothetical, and I picked this time frame because, and I think you'll understand because you've got 3 children that are grown. Um, a visit with your 16-year-old self. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a visit where you're going back to give advice. It could just be a visit to sit down and talk for 20, 30 minutes. If you could put us like the time and place where you were 16 years old, and I picked that time frame because it's a really critical kind of transition point in life where you're halfway between an adult and a child. You're starting to look beyond the horizons of your zip code and your state, and out into the world and starting to get bigger aspirations of what you think are possible or what you want to do. But if you could get back to that time, if you could just tell us like the place and time where you were, maybe mentally, the headspace you were in, and what would that conversation look like?
Wow. At 16, I was a hot mess. But I think when I look at my kids when they were 16, though my circumstances were different, I think you captured it well, John, by saying you're in between a child and an adult, right? There's a lot of things going on with your body, a lot of changes going on. So when I look back at my 16-year-old self, while I see it as this crazy, out of control guy that was just out of control, I probably wasn't much different than most 16-year-olds. So I think at 16 you have lots of dreams, right? Of things you want to do. And I think there's a gap in what you want to do and the reality of getting to those things, right? Being able to do those things. There's some young people, that are very focused. They know what they want to do. My middle one's one of them. Since he's been 10 years old, he wanted to be a commercial airline pilot. And then now he's got his degree. He's working for a year. He's going to go chase that dream next year. Good for him, right? But not everybody's like that, right? My oldest one, my youngest one, they're not like that. So I think the most important thing, if I was to go back to when I was 16 and have a discussion with myself at 16, I would listen. I'd listen. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do in life? What's your passion? Where do you see yourself? And I would listen, and then I would help them understand about mapping a plan back, right? From where you are to getting there. Because I think at that age, John, we don't think about a plan. We just think we're going to do it, but we really don't know how we're going to get there at age 16. Even at 18, I don't think we really know it. Majority, like I said, there's some people that are very focused and know. So I think if I the only I think listening would be first, and two, helping guide a plan to get to where they wanted to go. I think if I really had that at age 16, somebody that I trusted, and not that I had a bad upbringing. I mean, it wasn't the greatest upbringing, but I know people had it far worse than I did. Um, I think if I had somebody that I trusted and could give me that guidance, about making a plan to get where I want to be, I mean, I'm happy with my life, but who knows what my life would have been like had I done that, right? And I don't ever want to go back and replay my life. I'm happy with how life ended up, but I think I had a lot of aspirations when I was young to do a lot of things, and who knows whether I would have done them or not, right? But I think that is super important. It comes down to mentorship, right? And I think that's where you're going with this is having somebody that can help guide you on your path.
Yeah, I mean, mentorship for sure. But it's this kind of reoccurring theme because I think what you said also applies to really closely to transitioning out of the military, transitioning out of another job after a career. It's the same concept, right? It's like what you said in the very beginning, having a plan, going into it with a plan, starting 2 years out and planning forward to that time where you're going to get out and understanding where you're going to go. It's the quote that says you're only going to hit your target if you're aiming at your target. You can point the arrow out in the sky, but you're not going to hit the target that you want to hit unless you're actually aiming at the target. So yeah, from that point, from the 16-year-old visit, let's fast forward into the future a little bit and see if you had the opportunity to write a LinkedIn post, and this LinkedIn post was guaranteed to reach, let's say, 5 million eyeballs, and you only had 2 paragraphs to put in there. Any kind of idea that you want to put out into the world, any kind of slogan, any topic, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's completely open to whatever. What would you put in that LinkedIn post? What would be the most important thing for you to put in that LinkedIn post?
If I would have to write 2 paragraphs, it would be the positives of failing in life and how it helps you grow. If I was reaching 5 million people, and I could be about fishing or, golfing or, which I do, I would be the wrong person to give anybody any golfing advice, let me tell you. But really about failure, I think especially today in life, more so today, people are afraid to fail, right? That failure is so frowned upon. And I can't tell you, though, I've talked about a lot of my successes in life, but the failures that I made along the way, John, right, have helped me grow to be the person I am, right? Because obviously, when you're in the failure and something's going wrong in your life, right, it's ugly. But once you get a day or 2 days or 10 days away, you got to look at that failure and learn from it, right? Take away something positive from that, right? What did you learn? Okay, it failed. What did you learn from it? How can you grow from that? Because I think anybody who's been successful in life, and a lot of people are successful, right? But I'm talking about the most successful people. If we look at Bill Gates, we look at anybody, we can look at anybody. They didn't just get to where they are by being successful all the time. They made lots of mistakes along the way. And I think that they are who they are because they learn from them. And I, I can't say how important that is in life to not be afraid to take a risk, right? That's the other piece of that. If you take a risk, there's a possibility you're going to fail. Okay, take the risk. It doesn't mean go put your paycheck on the hard eight at the craps table, but it means take a calculated risk, right? One that has the potential to bring great gain and that you can overcome if you fail, right? And so that's the most important is, okay, I'm going to take this risk, whatever it is. I'm going to get out of the military. Well, if you do it planned and calculated, right, you can be successful. But if you just do it blindly, putting that paycheck on the hard eight on the crap table, your chances of success are a lot less, right? So even if you fail, just grow with it, learn from it.
As far as failures go, and I've had quite a few in my life as well, if there was one particular failure that you could point to that then turned into a success on the back end, like it's something that happened that was a failure that then later set you up for success later on down in life, whether it was 10, 20 years down the road, and you can actually correlate those two together. Is there any one particular one that sticks out in your mind that's done that?
Like I said earlier, I was a high school drop out, right? I got my GED, got in the military. And for years, I didn't take any college classes. And I had a mentor, Will Grevel. He was my NCO back in '89. I was frustrated, angry at the military, and we were coming off of an exercise out in the woods, and he drove with me, and he was trying to say, "Well, take some college classes," right? So I started taking college classes, um, and my career was good, but I was missing out on a lot of opportunities because I didn't have that degree. Everybody thinks, "Well, why is that degree so important?" And we're going to correlate it, how it came together, right? I mean, because I did a lot of great things. Um, But I finished my degree 20 years later. My commencement ceremony was in 2009 in Heidelberg with the University of Phoenix Online. And so 20 years later. So number one, why did I get the degree? I didn't get the degree because I thought it was going to further my career, right? I did it to set an example to my kids. I told my kids I wanted them to have a degree. Well, you know, got to put your money where your mouth is. So I went and finished my degree so I could say, I got it. I want you to do the same, right? And that was the only reason I did it. And I didn't realize all that time the opportunities that I was missing because I didn't have a degree, a piece of paper, as everybody calls it, right? And where that ended up turning into success is I was stationed overseas as a civil servant. I was coming back stateside. And I'll talk further about this. This is a really great conversation about the education, how important it is. And I ended up getting a job at the Pentagon working for this guy, Darren King. And Darren was like, "Ooh, you only have a bachelor's," right? Because at the time it was a 14 job. And the director he worked for was looking for people with master's degrees, right? So I got quite fortunate that with my experience, I was able to get in there with only a bachelor's. But I will tell you, when it got time to get promoted again, I missed out on a lot of opportunities because I didn't have my master's degree. I kept on missing opportunity over and over again because I didn't have a master's. So let's go back in time, right? How does not having a degree a failure? Well, it prevented promotions in the military. It really did because, civilian education, at least it used to be. I've been retired for 17 years. I don't even know if that counts for anything anymore, John, for promotion in the enlisted side. I missed out on promotions in private industry and in civil service, right? So thank God I got the bachelor's because if I didn't have the bachelor's, that job at the Pentagon never would have happened, and I wouldn't be here having this conversation with you today, probably more than likely. So I can't emphasize. I, I've told my kids if you're going to get a degree, go do it right away. Get it done before you have a family, before you have a job and have kids, because then you'll drag your degree out for forever, like I did. Right? Get it in the rearview mirror and get it done. But even if you're not going to have that life, let's say you decide school's not for you and you're not ready for college, right? Because you have to be mature enough and disciplined enough to do the work. I would, at 18, I wasn't disciplined enough to do that work, John. I would have never done it. But I'm just going to be honest. But get it done. Get that degree and don't stop with your bachelor's, right? Do it for your own personal drive and commitment. So I don't have my master's today. But Johnny, you and I have talked. In 2 to 5 years, I'm going to retire. Guess what I'm going to do at age 60? I'm going to go get my master's degree. You know why I'm going to get it? Because I want to teach. I want to give back to people. So I'm going to go follow through and get that master's degree just so I can help teach out there in the community.
There's a few instances where I see where it could be helpful. Like for certain GS jobs, they require a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. Like that's part of the requirement. You can't get around it. And a lot of cases, even if you have experience, they won't pull your resume for it. So,
here's what a bachelor's degree tells an employer is you can write, right? And how many jobs today don't require writing? They all do. You have to be able to write papers. You have to be able to make PowerPoint presentations. You have to be able to deliver a message. And that's what that degree says, is that you can effectively write.
Whether it's a military career, government civilian career, private sector career, the reason why you got your degree so that you can be the example to your kids. What kind of legacy at this point in time, after all of that stuff is said and done? Because I usually get the legacy from the military perspective, like, okay, now you're retiring. What kind of legacy did you want to leave behind? But now that we're beyond and we're past a second career going on the finish of a third career, what kind of legacy would you like to leave behind?
A legacy that I left behind was loyalty to the government, man. I mean, I gave over, 30 plus years, I guess 37 years to the government, 37, 36 years of my life to the government. A long time. A lot of people serve a lot more than I do. So, you know, but the legacy I think is service, right? Serving and serving. When people hear that, I think most people think it means kowtowing, right? And saying the right things and doing the right things. John, I spent my whole career in the military. I know people are not going to believe this is true. And in my civil service, questioning everything. I questioned everything. If it didn't make sense, I would question, right? But I did it because I cared about, right, the government, how the government spends its money. And I'm sure that's a whole topic, but I will tell you, in the time I managed money in the government, John, I was always questioning every penny. I didn't worry about what others were doing, right? But what I did is I taught people why managing down to the penny was so important. And I'm not talking about micromanaging. I'm saying questioning where money's going. Why are we spending money on stuff? Even if it's just $300, right? Because people would, I remember people saying, well, it's just $300, Kevin. Why are you worried about it? And I go, great, pull out your credit card, you buy it. Oh, wait a second. Okay. Well, that's how you should be treating the taxpayer dollars, as if it was your money. So a legacy of service to me means serving the government, but doing the government's best interests. I think in everything I did in the military, in civil service, and even today as a contractor, right? Everything that I'm doing is hopefully to make the government make good choices and do the right things. And while there's a lot of crazy stuff we see on TV every day about the government, it doesn't matter if it's Congress or the military or whatever. Behind the scenes, there's a lot of people like me and people that do more than me to serve this country and do the right thing. And if there's a message behind there, there's a lot of people trying to do the right thing for the government, regardless. So service is a legacy, serving my country, right? It's one thing to say you're patriotic. It's another thing to put your money where your mouth is.
Actions speak louder than words.
Yes, sir.
You are one of the key mentors in my life. And I know we haven't had interactions completely the whole time, but you've been consistent with me the whole time. So the Kevin today gives me the no bullshit, no punches held back story that the Kevin from 10 or 15 years ago gave me. And that's really stuck with me, like in my mind. And that's why, when I'm having a nervous breakdown and I'm trying to debate whether I'm going to stay in the Army for 4 more years or get out, and like, you're the person that I reach out to. And the funny thing is you've always been there, like, regardless. And you stop everything in your day and you set aside time and you take the time to spend with me and talk to me and discuss things. Who is one of your, like, key mentors, and what makes them a key mentor?
Probably one that stands out was when I was in civil service. His name's Dave McEwen. And Dave is currently the DOD CISO, right? So Dave is incredibly intelligent, but I had a lot of rough edges, and you know those rough edges, John. But Dave chipped away at those in the years I worked for Dave. I worked for Dave for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, I want to say. And what's great about Dave is I sat right next to him, and it's a great thing that I sat next to Dave. But you know the bad thing? I sat next to Dave. So on the bad days, it wasn't a great day to sit next to Dave. But I'll tell you what, Dave, when I screwed up, here's the great thing about Dave. He pulled me in his office, sit me down, and he wouldn't chastise me, right? How many people you know? So he helped grow me. Even though he's my supervisor, he was still my mentor, right? He grew me into being who I am in this point in my career, right? Because if I was doing something wrong, he'd sit me down, explain to me what's wrong with it, make me understand, right? He'd put me in his shoes. Now imagine, Kevin, if I worked for you and I did this, right? But he kind of grew me in many, many ways about dealing, like when I was dealing with named operations, whatever, he was always there. And I could always talk to Dave, and he would always give me the greatest advice. But he wouldn't just do it for me, right? I mean, he's that kind of guy. He would do it for anybody. I could introduce you to him today, and you could bring some up to him, and he'd give you a wealth of knowledge, and he'd share his cell phone number, and he'd say, John, if you need anything, give me a call. I'm here for you, right? I mean, that's the kind of down to earth guy is that he'd always make time, right, to talk to me, and right, he always gave me a different perspective, right, because I always wanted to go from GS 14 to 15, and for a long time he didn't think I was ready. But he kept on chiseling away at the things that I needed to learn, right? About being calm, right? Not being the hothead in the room, right? Because you know me, I used to be pretty hot headed. But if you're going to be a leader, you got to be the coolest person in the room. You can't be the hottest person in the room, right? Because that's the only way people are going to come talk to you. That's the only way you're going to get the real information you need to make decisions. So he did a lot of things, and I tell you, John, he never stopped pushing me. That's a great thing about a mentor. He never stopped pushing me. Every time I would achieve the goal, he'd move the goalpost. And he didn't do it to mess with me. What he realized is he had to find that point of where, right, I was going as far as I could and I couldn't go no more. And that's super important for a mentor to do, right, is to push you beyond your comfort zone. Right? And he did. He pushed me out of my comfort zone constantly. And initially, I'd get frustrated about it. Right? I would get mad. I'm like, man, I knocked it out. What do you mean it's not good enough? Well, I'm not saying it's, Dave, real calm. Kevin, relax, man. I'm not saying it's not good enough. You did a good job. But what I realize is I can get more out of you. So I'm going to keep on challenging you. Don't take it personal. Right? I'm going to push you outside of your natural comfort zone and your abilities. And it's going to help make you a better person. I mean, smile about it, right? Make you feel good about it. So that's the kind of person I think makes a great mentor. Somebody that's willing to invest that time and not only push you beyond your limits, but explain why they're doing it, right? Because a lot of people don't do that. They'll push you, push you, push you, and you think they're just trying to mess with you or trying to get you to fail, when in essence, they're really just trying to help you grow and be a better person.
Yeah, really having just a good sense of empathy and compassion, kindness. There's a few words that I would attribute to that, but it sounds about right. And just to be fair, like I think we're all pretty hot headed when we're in our 30s and we're still young and we still got it and we're still running with the young kids, and then eventually at 40 or 50 or 60 that kind of weans off naturally, I think, over time. As you've been progressing through your career, as you progress through the military, and as you progress through your life, and I assume you're a big reader like me, at least with military documentation, I know you were a big reader because you knew all the regulations inside and out, backwards and forwards. So that's reading, one way of reading, I guess. Are there any books, like maybe one or two books that you could point to that have been really, really impactful in your life as far as useful information, quality information?
Absolutely. The first one that comes to mind is the one that everybody who works for me has to read. It's the 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey. So there's the 1 Minute Manager series from Ken Blanchard. And the first book he wrote is 1 Minute Manager, right? Talks about, 1 minute to praise, 1 minute to scold, all this stuff. But the 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey is probably one of the best ones because it's about when you're in a leadership position and people come to you with problems, right? How to deal with that. Because what do? Somebody comes to me with a problem and they put the monkey on our back, right? That's what the book's really about. And the book teaches you when people come to you with problems, instead of leaving the monkey with you, you send the monkey back out the door with them. Valuable lesson. And everybody at the Pentagon has had to read that work with me because the Pentagon's a crazy place. And people, if you're good at work, people will dump on you, right? And that book I read when I was an enlisted guy. I don't remember. It was early 90s I read it. And it has stuck with me all these years. And people who work for me at the Pentagon have all told me, oh my God, that is like the best read because you can get overwhelmed with all the problems people bring to you. And you got to learn to not take all the problems that everybody else has on your back, right? And it can work good in your personal life too, right? That's one of them. Another book, the second book, I'm going to bring up three books. Second book would be Good to Great. Good to Great is an analysis of companies that succeeded 15 consecutive years in a row and compares it to companies that did well but didn't do it for 15 years. And it sounds like it's a very dry book, but they did a great job of taking all the things they learned about from successful companies and writing it in such a way that it's actually great to read, fun to read. So that has really helped me because one of the subjects in that book is about making sure that everybody on the bus is in the right seat. And if they're not in the right seat, do you kick them off the bus or do you put them in a different seat? Because sometimes people working for you, they're just not in the right job. Doesn't mean that they can't be a part of the team. They're just not in the right job. So maybe there's a different job they can do and you get to keep them on the team. Right. And it's an important concept that a lot of times we put people in jobs thinking they do well, and when they fail, we want to fire them instead of perhaps we know they have great skills. Let's put them somewhere where they can succeed. And the last book that I really enjoyed reading, my Rear Admiral Hurley had me read it, called Leadership and Self-Deception. Now, it's written from two diametrically opposed people. One was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the other one grew up in Berkeley in a very liberal lifestyle, and they wrote this book together about leadership and self-deception. It's a great read. I thought it was going to be a horrible read, but there's some great lessons and takeaways in that book that have helped me really balance about groupthink, right? And the power of groupthink. People think that's a bad thing, right? I learned a lot about how groupthink can really bring, right, a lot of value to the team. Remember, I talked about open communication, people being able to express their thoughts. I learned a lot about that. I mean, I had known about it, but that book really helped me to really learn to use that to my advantage, right, in solving problems.
Yeah, funny enough, I've got 6 or 7 of his books on the shelf, and that is not one of them. So my favorite out of to this point, anyway, is Who Moved My Cheese. That's my favorite one.
I like that one too. Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna have to check out that one. I haven't heard that title yet. That's a brand new one for me. So
What, the 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey? Oh my God, you're gonna love it. Would you do me a favor? Would you do me a favor? Would you put this aside? Would you let me honor you and send you the book?
No.
I would be honored to do that.
Sure.
I'd be happy. The book's not expensive, man. It's a little paperback book. It'll take you an hour to read.
Okay. And you know I'll read it.
I know you will.
I can't turn down a good book. It's my drug of choice is literature and books.
It's stuck with me for 30 years, man. So what does that tell you? It's powerful.
That's one of the reasons why I asked. There's books out there, and not everybody reads, but I mean, there's certain books out there that just grab you, like grab your soul and pull it in a direction, and um, really can really change the course of your life, like really alter the course of your life.
Have you read Good to Great?
I have the book. I've read excerpts from it and different things from it, but I haven't read it from cover to cover. No.
Highly encourage you to read it, man. Good read. And I was enjoying reading it. I couldn't believe how they took something so analytic and made it so fun to read for me.
Yeah, I mean it's a bit outdated because it talks about companies from a little bit further back, but yeah, the principles and the fundamental truths hold true.
They apply. And one of the companies that was successful for 15 years is out of business, Circuit City. But comparing Walmart and Walgreens, I mean, there's some great examples of companies that are still in business today. So that's what's amazing to read, right? Is to read some of that stuff.
Yeah, it's one that's been on my list of reading list for quite some time. I just haven't got to it. And then I move on to other books and I get distracted by books and plow through books, and it's a never ending battle with me. Um, I did want to tell you about one book, and whether you would like it or not, I mentioned it a few times in the podcasts here and there. That's a very pivotal book that really not only changed my life in one instance, but it's changed my life on a day-to-day basis over the last however many years it's been published. I think it was 2014, 15, somewhere around there when it was published, I believe. Or maybe it was even earlier than that, maybe 2012. But this book literally is one page a day, and it's literally drastically changed the course of my life, mentally, emotionally, physically, psychologically. And it deals with Stoicism, which is a 2,000-year-old philosophy that's been handed down over the ages. It's called The Daily Stoic. It's by Ryan Holiday. And it's amazing. And it's really the genre of that book, the 365 days or 366 days books, those kind of daily insight books. There's another one by Robert Greene called The Daily Laws. I read that as well every single day. And those little books like that give you that little nugget of information. And that's why I love reading them in the morning, because I know when I don't read it in the morning and I wait until the evening, there's something in that page somehow that's connected to something that happened during my day that would have guided me down a different path in that situation in the day. I don't know how it works. I really don't understand it. It's some kind of cosmic thing that happens. It's very esoteric, but yeah, that book right there is really.
Daily Stoic by Holiday.
Yep, Ryan Holiday. He's written plenty of great books. You probably heard of a couple of his books. The Obstacle is the Way is one of his books. So he's written a bunch of good books. But that one right there is, in particular, is a really good like daily nugget to not only get you in the habit of reading or get you into reading, kind of like a gateway drug, but it also just, it's amazing how the stuff in that page, if you don't read it beforehand, plays out somewhere in your life throughout that day. It's nuts.
I'm going to read it. And I'll tell you this, just me and you talking about reading the regulations. The only way you're going to know what's right is read them damn regulations, man.
Same in the civilian world.
It is.
I'm going to hypothetically put you in front of an audience of, say, 30 people. We're going to be at the local base where you're at the transition point, the SFL TAP. And they've invited you in because you've finished your doctorate degree and you've been, or, finished your next degree and started teaching at a local college or at a university or somewhere, and they said, hey, we've got this guy, this resource, he's nearby and he's kind of active in the community still because he's really close to the military, we want to bring him in and give a talk to 30 of our transitioning members who are getting out in the course of the next year or 6 months or whatever it happens to be. And the audiences varied from E4s to lieutenant colonels and everything in between, right? Males, females. What would the thesis of your talk be, and what are maybe a couple bullet points in that talk that you would discuss to talk to those transitioning service members?
You always got tough questions for me that I'm prepared to answer. Wow, that's a good one. I think it would be, they're transitioning out, right? And they've served their country. But it doesn't, and maybe they'll go on to serve their country or maybe they won't. But the thing is, they can always make a difference. Make a difference, right? Be that person to make change. Don't just go with the flow, right? Be be a change agent. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be in your job. It could be in your community, right? As a volunteer. It could be as a politician. I mean, but be a change agent in whatever you do in life. Why is that so important? How many people today are in a job or they're in volunteering or they're in politics and they're saying all the right things, but they're not doing anything to make a difference, right? Where are the actions that meet the words we were talking earlier? So I think we all have different passions. All of us are completely wired differently. We all have different things that are important to us for different reasons. It doesn't matter what our political or religious values are. None of that matters. What matters is we can all be passionate. We're all passionate about something, whatever that is. So chase that and make a difference in whatever that is, right? Because when you're passionate about that and you chase it, you're not only impacting your own life, you're impacting others, right? And if it's something you truly believe in and you're passionate about, imagine we were talking earlier about if you can just change one life, right? Imagine if you can change one life or you can inspire one person, the difference you can make, right? And that person changes one person. And do the math on that. And I heard, was it 2014 commencement speech? Admiral McRaven, I think it is. He was giving a commencement speech at the University of Texas, and he talks about that, right? How powerful that is. I mean, that to me is, I mean, his whole speech, that whole commencement speech was great, but that whole thing about making a change and being the change agent for tomorrow and influencing others, right? Is so important, especially in today's crazy world. When I talk about crazy, I'm talking about there's so many dynamics going on between politics in our country to the war in Ukraine to financial imbalances in the world, not only in this country. So I think if we just chase our passions and make a difference, we can make this place a better place.
I love that. See, it's not that hard.
I didn't think about that for a minute.
Yeah, there's some tough questions in here, but I think they're all worthwhile, and that's the people that I have on, every single one of them they have the capacity to. I'm pushing you out of your comfort zone, and you have the capacity to answer some of these questions, and I believe that the answers are impactful. So, um, I'm going to be really respectful of your time because you've put up with me badgering you about it, and you've waited an extra hour, even though we're scheduled for tomorrow, but and said, you know what, let's just do it today. And I know we're sitting at about the 2 hour and some change mark, but I do want to open it up and give you the opportunity. If there's anything we haven't covered, if there's anything you'd like to discuss, any questions you have for me, or anything you have a question for the audience, or anything like that, um, I want to open it up so you can take that opportunity.
We were talking about it earlier, and I just want to emphasize this about my whole career. I questioned things that didn't make sense. And there's different ways to do that, right? You don't have to do it the way Kevin did it. Kevin would take a sledgehammer to everything, right? And sometimes you only need a scalpel. Sometimes you might only need a chisel or a screwdriver, right? But I took a sledgehammer to everything. And if I could leave one parting message is when something doesn't seem right, don't be afraid to question it. Come up with a solution if you think something's wrong or you don't think something is correct, and offer solutions, right? That is so important. So many times we see things, and I don't care. It could be walking down the street and somebody dropping a piece of paper on the ground. It could be as simple as that, right? Now, there's many ways, right? Kevin would take the sledgehammer and run up to them and yell at them for dropping the piece of paper, but there's also the perspective that you can just pick up that piece of paper and put it in the garbage, right? And there's a myriad of things you can do in between, right? But when you see something that's not right, don't be afraid to question it and correct it. Because we often like using that piece of paper. Okay, the piece of paper dropped. What are we going to do? We're going to walk by and ignore it. A lot of people today will. A lot of people 20 years ago would, right? But the people that make a difference in this world are not afraid to question things. How they do it or how they take action on things they see is what makes a difference, right? Because we're all wired differently. So I just think that's so important to not ignore the things going on around you that you don't think are right and do something about them. They don't have to be the big things. They can start as the little things, as simple as picking up that piece of paper.
There was one more question, if you got the time, I wanted to ask you about, and it pertains to personal brand. I know when you're in the military, when you're in the civil service, it's not really that big of a deal. Like your personal brand is basically like making connections and networking with people so that you can move on to the next position. And that's a whole nother discussion and topic because that translates out into the civilian world where, I mean, in my experience, at least, it was literally just the network that you build provides the jobs that you will have in the future. But from a personal brand perspective, now in the private sector, and maybe it's not important, maybe it's irrelevant, but as I see the market start to get subdivided more and more and more, as job responsibilities get niched down into these smaller subsections and segments. And as I see, as we were talking about in the beginning, the technology wave coming, like the AI is coming. It may or may not take people's jobs. I honestly don't think it's going to take away jobs. It's like a tractor. It's like Gary Vee says, it's like a tractor. Like people, when the tractor was first introduced to the world, people were pissed off. Like farmers were mad. And then they slowly embraced it and realized, oh, well, this thing helps me till, hundreds of acres instead of 10 acres at a time. So it's really just an augment to what we as humans can do. And it just really helps us to perform better, to do better things. That's my opinion of it. But as far as personal branding goes, do you feel that that's important and necessary for people that are transitioning now out of the military, whether they've done 8 years or 10 years or 25 years? And also for the GS civilians out there who may be watching this, is that personal branding something that you've been tracking at all or have any opinion on?
Absolutely. It's extremely important, especially today with social media and all the digital stuff out there. Um, you got to be careful. Um, I'm quite vocal today. I'm vocal because I'm not in the government, working for the government anymore. But I still balance, right? I'm very careful what I say and how I say it, right? I'm not hiding anything. Um, but I'm now a private citizen. I and I've been more vocal in social media than probably I ever have in my whole, since I guess I got social media maybe 2010, 2011. So in 13 years, I'm probably more vocal now than I am. But I think it's important to be vocal today. But let's talk about the soldier or the civilian or somebody who's transitioning, how important your personal branding is. Because I can tell you that there are companies out there that will, for a fee, search the dark web on an employee for information. In other words, let's say, John, I'm going to hire you into my company, but I don't know you, right? And I've decided John is one of my final candidates. So there's companies that I can go to and say, hey, I'd like you to run uh, a search on the dark web and tell me what you got on John McConnell, right? Stuff that you don't normally see. So when I tell you personal branding, as far as what people see, which is what you can Google, and the stuff that is not so visible, be careful because it's extremely important. And you leave a digital footprint in everything you do today, everything you do. And depending on the kind of work you want to do in today's world, that could have a positive or a negative impact on your ability to find employment. So one of the areas in a positive, so let's talk on a positive note. Um, I had got off of LinkedIn years ago. I dropped my LinkedIn account and I had a guy working for me, but I always knew, I always told him, I said, dude, I should be working for you because you're an amazing guy. Jesse Whaley, he works for Amtrak. He was the CISO last time. I think he's even got promoted beyond CISO at Amtrak. Great guy. And he told me, Kevin, if you want to have a career and you want to brand yourself for hiring outside beyond civil service, you have to be on LinkedIn. You have to have 500 plus connections. So I went out on a mission and I grew my LinkedIn profile, right? And if you look at what I post on Facebook is a lot different than what I post on LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn's a professional, right? And it should be treated professional, not that everybody does, but um, and I'm connected with roughly 1,700 people on LinkedIn, and it's not about a number, right? For me, I don't care about the numbers, but if you're trying to brand yourself for employment, especially in private industry, you have to build yourself a LinkedIn profile, and you got to connect with people. And anybody listening to this, anybody who dares listens to these words, if you make a connection with me, I will connect with you, right? I will. I'll connect with anybody because I want to help them build their profile. And I recently helped somebody do that. Um, Her and I worked together as government civilians. We both retired about the same time, and she didn't have a LinkedIn profile. And then what I did is, I mentioned her on a LinkedIn profile and mentioned her by name. I added her so she would know. And boom, all of a sudden everybody started connecting with her and really helped her build her persona, her digital, her professional image out there, her branding, which was super important to her getting work. So I hope that kind of brings it home.
You brought up a really interesting nuanced point about your behavior on LinkedIn versus your behavior on Facebook versus behavior on TikTok or Twitter or whatever it happens, Instagram, whatever it happens to be, um, is a really, really key thing because not only for your behavior in the public, but also the nuanced context of the platform itself. If you're writing articles on LinkedIn, if you've set up a LinkedIn account and you're an expert in supply chain management and you just happen to be able to write blog posts, like you should be doing that. You should absolutely be writing about what you're good at or create a video with a, walkthrough talking camera video or whatever it happens to be. But you also have to keep in mind the context of the platform. And like you said, LinkedIn is a very professional platform. My LinkedIn is probably not as professional as everybody else's. I don't have a headshot or anything like that, but Yeah, it's very contextual because then you can take that, if you understand that, you can take that as part of your brand and translate it to a Twitter or to an Instagram or something like that and still keep the kind of professionalism that you have on LinkedIn, but just translating that same blog post to a Facebook post and understanding that if you just change the context slightly to meet what the context of Facebook is, that allows you to spread your branding out to other platforms, because it's not just, I mean, LinkedIn is important, but as you mentioned, if a potential employer wants to do a background search on you, they're going to search everything else but LinkedIn. I mean, they'll look at your LinkedIn, but they're also going to look, see if you have Facebook and see if you have Instagram and see if you have Twitter and see if you have TikTok, and or if you have a YouTube channel. And the searching that they can do, like you mentioned, like it literally just takes a phone number or an email address and you can pull all the data. So yeah, thank you for that. That's a good point. I like that. And I think that is a good stopping point, unless there's anything else we missed. I do want to ask you, for the audience, if anybody wanted to contact you or get a hold of you or reach out to you, where would you point them to besides LinkedIn?
Oh, besides LinkedIn, they can email me. I'm happy to give out my email address to somebody who want to reach out to me. I have no problem putting my email address out there because I always get messages from I've been pwned, right, about how people have my information. So it's my first initial K and my last name HAIMOVICI at gmail.com.
That's a very brave move there. I hope this doesn't go viral at some point in time. You never know, but
Well, if it does, I mean, life's good.
hey, John, I just got 20,000 emails the other day because
Well, I have other email addresses I use occasionally. I guess, um, you know, that address might become an alternate address at that point, but I highly doubt that's going to happen. But no, seriously, if somebody wants to reach out for professional device mentoring, I, and I say this honestly, right? It's available. I put it out there because I love to help people. I'll help anybody. Just like Dave McEwen, like the example I gave about Dave McEwen helping. If you, I would introduce you to him, he would help you out. I'm the same kind of guy. I'd help anybody, anywhere.
oh, thank you for that. And I hope it doesn't blow up, but then I hope it has some fruitful endings, and you never know who you cross paths with.
If I can help one person that makes a difference to 10 other people, imagine the difference we can make in the world.
That's right. And on that note, that's a perfect ending place. On that note, for everybody watching, anything we discussed, any of the books we talked about, any of the links to any resources that we talked about, we'll have them in the show notes. As I always forget to tell you, if you need to jump around, there'll be timestamps all throughout this video, so you can hop around to different points, or if you're searching for specific stuff on the web, that you'll find it with those timestamps. And until next time, thank you very much, Kevin, for being here with me. I really, really greatly appreciate it, that you've taken the time, that you continue to take the time. And I really enjoyed the conversation. Like, I like this format, and I really like the fact that we could sit down and have a nice 2-hour one-on-one. We should have brought some adult beverages maybe next time, and just sit and chill and talk it out. And I appreciate all your kind words and your wise words of wisdom. So thank you for that.
John, it's always great talking to you. I really enjoy spending time with you. Honestly, it's always uh, it's time well spent. I always know that, and look forward to doing this again with you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm game. We could do drunken DO details on another episode. So I'm totally game for that.
Awesome.
So for everybody else out there in the interwebs, thank you for tuning in. If you stuck around this long, and appreciate you being part of this journey that we're going on together. And we will talk to you all next time.